All right, welcome back to the drive-thru, boys and girls. Brought to you as always by the deli. Hungry for a breakfast sandwich? Stop by the deli. Get yourself a flatbread with sausage, egg, and cheese on whole wheat. All right, we're here today with 1-4. This is your introduction to two-column proofs, something you've never done in a math class before, so this should be scary and fun all at the same time. Here's how it's going to work. You're going to get things called theorems, okay? A theorem is a mathematical statement that can be proven. If you're wondering, a postulate is a mathematical statement that is assumed to be true because it cannot be proven. Okay? So, here's how it'll work. You'll get a theorem introduced to you, and then you're going to prove that theorem, or you're going to read about that proof in the book, because it just takes too much time to prove every theorem that we get introduced. And then once a theorem has been introduced and proven, you are now able to use that theorem on quizzes, homeworks, and tests. So we are building this huge library of mathematical statements that we can use to prove other mathematical statements true. I want you to imagine that you invented a language. The first couple words in your language would be very difficult to define, because you don't have any other words to define them with. So the beginning of the dictionary would be the hardest part of the dictionary to write. That's exactly how this is going to go in this class. These first proofs are weird, and they're kind of difficult because they're so weird or so easy that they're almost challenging and strange. So here we go. Theorem 1, our first theorem. If two angles are right angles, then they are congruent. Seems easy enough, okay? Now we got to prove it. That's the challenge. In every proof, you will have a piece of given information. That is all going to be assumed to be true. It's given to you, so you can assume that it's true. So here, we have angle A and angle B, and I can label them as right angles because we were given that they were right angles. What we are trying to prove is that angle A is congruent to angle B. In order to do this, you use a two-column proof system. Always on the left will be your statement, and on the right will be your reason or your support. Okay? Consider yourself a lawyer. You can't say a statement in front of the courtroom unless you have a reason to back that statement up, like a proof. You can't just go around saying things in life. You have to support them with evidence. Okay? CER. Okay. So, let's say that angle A, comma, angle B are right angles. You can see that I'm okay with you abbreviating. Your reason for that is given, meaning the reason that I know that's true is that it was given to me, and I can assume that things that are given to me are indeed true. For now, I'm not going to combine anything into the same steps. Eventually, as we go, we can shorten these a little bit. So I can say that angle A, the measure of angle A equals 90 degrees. And if you think about it, what's the reason that I can say that a right angle is 90 degrees? Well, that has to do with what we learned in class yesterday. That's the definition of what? That's the definition of a right angle. We can use definitions as reasons. Okay? Then I will say the measure of angle B is 90 degrees. And that's also the definition of right angles. So what's the definition of congruence? We learned that yesterday. Two angles are said to be congruent if they have the same measurement. So now I can say angle A is congruent to angle B by the definition of congruence. And that is our first proof. Now we can say, moving forward, that if we have two angles that are right angles, that those two angles are congruent to each other, and we don't have to go through this process anymore. So we'll save ourselves some time. You'll see that as we move forward through the notes. Okay, here's Theorem 2. If two angles are straight angles, then they are congruent. Okay, so I'll draw a quick little picture here. Here's angle ABC is a straight angle. Angle DEF is a straight angle. This proof will seem exactly like the last one. Here are my statements. Here are my reasons, or my support. And that reason is given to me. Okay? What will I say next? What's the definition of a straight angle? It's an angle whose measure is what? 180 degrees. So the measure of angle ABC, now I'll show you, we can consolidate this into the same step. And the reason I can consolidate this into a single step is that they have the same reason. And that's the definition of a straight. I don't exactly sure how to spell straight. I think there's two different ways, but maybe not. Okay, the definition of a straight angle. So look at the difference between the last proof, where I wrote out the definition of right angle twice in this area, and then I kind of used shorthand, and then here I just combined them into one step. So now you're able to do that if you wish. Okay? So now I can say that angle ABC is congruent to angle DEF, and that would be the definition of congruence. Okay? Remember, the definition of congruence is that two angles or two segments have the same measure. So, now we move on to an example problem. Given that RST is 50, and that would be 50 degrees, sorry, I don't have that kind of capability, I could have written it in, and TSV is 40 degrees, prove that angle X is a right angle. Statements here. Reasons here. Okay. Okay, so start with my givens. Angle RST equals 50 degrees, and angle TSV equals 40 degrees. Angle X is a right angle. All of that is my given information, so I listed it all in one single step. You will see that the book occasionally breaks those up into 3 different steps. It doesn't matter to me. Okay, so what I can say is that angle RSV RST plus angle TSV equals 90 degrees. And my reason would be because 50 plus 40 equals 90. That's going to be weird for a couple days, but it'll start to make sense. I don't love the way the book introduces this to us, but this is just how they decide to, so we're going to go with it. So now we know that angle RSV RSV equals 90 degrees. Okay? And the reason, again, would just be addition. So, let me scroll up just a little bit so you can see our pictures. Now we're going to say that angle RSV is a right angle. That's the definition of right angle. Okay? And now, using Theorem 1, we can say that angle RSV is congruent to angle X, and the reason is, if you don't write theorems by numbers, you write them as if-then. So if two angles are right angles, then they are congruent. And we have succeeded in our first example proof. Hope you guys have a great day. You can start your homework now. Boom!